Hi, I'm Michelle Olivier, and you're listening to Hey, I Want Your Job, the podcast that looks at amazing jobs and what it takes to get them. Hey, and welcome to Hey, I Want Your Job. Today, I am talking to Ryan, who has a really cool job. And I was just telling him that I was super excited, feeling very timely, because Freakonomics has just done an episode with somebody in a similar industry. And so I'm intrigued and jazzed, and I have many, many questions. As a viewer and listener, heads up, Ryan's industry may have some trigger stuff, and some of our conversation may. I don't think so. You should be fine. But just as a warning, we will be talking about death and bodies and what we do with all of those things. So on that somewhat cryptic intro, Ryan, what is your job title?
I'm a funeral director. I'm a paramedic. I'm a podcaster, embalmer. That is the job title, definitely. So
we're going to focus on
range, I think.
There's a lot of things that you do. We're going to focus on the funeral director and the embalmer one. So
let's do that.
Those are obviously related, but talk to me, what do those jobs actually do? Because I don't think people have a really clear picture of what your day ending and why looks like.
Honestly, I'll say this: funeral directing, there's two different parts to it: the funeral aspect of it, and then the embalming aspect of this as well. Okay. And anatomically and dealing with human anatomy is one action of it, and the other action of funeral service would be doing the paperwork, meeting with the family, sitting with them and arranging their loved one's funeral. It's interesting because there is a business side and a clinical side to what this is, and that's something,
and a human side as well. Like there's definitely just a purely emotive part, I would think.
Well, what do you mean motive?
Emotional part of it.
Emotional, yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot to that. I think when it comes to emotion, we deal with that and we walk through that with these families. And there's something that, because my father's always said in the past, we bleed a little bit with these families. So emotion's definitely involved, and that depends too on the case. Someone that's passed away that's 95, there can be emotion there depending on who that is. But I can say this in tragic cases, young individuals, young adults, that's really hard. And that's when emotion pops in. But yes, that's what I do is I embalm. I'm a funeral director, or help arrange funerals. I disinfect, preserve, human remains to be viewed by the public and the family. That's kind of what I do. I mean,
so my first question is, are all funeral directors embalmers and all embalmers funeral directors, or is there sometimes a disconnect between those things?
Gotcha. No, and here's the thing: every state is different within their regulation and how they do things. There are funeral directors that are not embalmers. I believe the state of Kentucky has two different licensures for that. In the state of Indiana, where I'm from, it is one licensure, of which you have the title of funeral director and embalmer. Now, everybody here in Indiana doesn't necessarily do both. There's some that do actual trade embalming, where you have funeral homes that will call in an embalmer to come in and handle something. If, for instance, here lately, with COVID, how the workload has changed immensely. We've had to have a little bit of help there. So, there is that aspect of it. And there's also people that are sometimes just arrangers, sometimes just funeral directors. And I say just, I don't mean it to sound like that.
Not being dismissive, just as opposed to both together. I get it. So I have questions already. I'm excited.
Yeah, go for it.
So, with regards to the embalming process, there has been the Freakonomics episode and other things as well have kind of thrown a lot of question at the moment as to whether or not in 2021, is that even something we should be doing? Is there a reason for it? Is there, other than just tradition? And people have said, there are more eco-friendly things, more economic options for families that we should be looking at and exploring. As somebody in the sector, what's your thought on that?
I always go back to this because I'm a person that loves options. I don't care necessarily what you want to do. For instance, Washington State, they're doing natural organic reduction now, which is what some have how the media has painted it at times, human composting. I like natural organic reduction better, but where they actually have a human and compost the human.
Sure.
And that's an option they provide there. That's within their state law, within their right. And that's something that's legal there. Green burial is something different. I don't think, here's the thing, it doesn't bother me. Some funeral directors, I think, get sideways about it, about the idea of, the traditional service and the viewing the day before, full day service, or viewing before the service and a full day, or, 1 day, 2 day kind of deal. Okay. That's not necessarily the case for me. There's a lot of funeral directors my age, within my age range, and some that I've learned from that are older than me, that are just about the idea of providing the option as to what the family finds value in. That's the biggest thing. I don't care what the recipe is, but if you find value in it, then I'm okay with that as well. I'm here to direct. So for me, it's not anything that I when it comes to green, when it comes to whatever, we'll figure it out. I mean, if you want to do it, we can do it. It's not a problem. I think we get stuck in an old guard mindset at times. And I think that's the way it is within any profession, especially this, because this is something that's been around since the Egyptians, since before then. They are the architects of embalming. So
I think also you uniquely are in a space where people don't talk about what you do. I mean, I'm in recruitment. Everybody bitches about recruiters, right? Everybody thinks that they know more than recruiters. Everybody will tell you, oh, HR, blah, 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 and they'll make up 9,000 laws that you're usually not laws, but everybody talks about it. Whereas what you do, I know like so many people and so many families really struggle to have any kind of a dialogue about it. Like, death is a really taboo subject in our culture. I'm actually a trained and licensed bereavement counselor. So I deal with people after you get done with them.
Yeah, aftercare. Yeah.
But like so many of the people that I've helped and worked with in that situation are where they are because they never had a conversation. They don't like talking about death. We're not comfortable about it. We shove it into shadows. We turn it into jokes. We make spoofs. You know what I mean? Like all of that. And talking about your experience of that, living in that place, like how do you deal with that? What is that impact in terms of your work and what you do?
Well, what I'll say is this: is I've had the opportunity to see death in its most tragic form, I would say, as a paramedic, and then moving into funeral service. It's something we now have to provide that acceptable, recognizable look for that family, even in the worst situations. I think that, to be honest with you, I don't know that if that was a really long question and I just got lost.
I'm sorry. I'm bad. I told you I was excited. And so I rambled.
You're excited.
There.
What is the general question? Give me that.
So the general question is, how does our societal reluctance to talk about and engage with death wind up impacting people once they come to your sphere of services? So more the families, obviously, than the body.
It's tough. With me, it's different. There's emotion involved. But yeah, I mean, it's tough for people. I have people that, don't even want to talk about making or fabricating a monument because it affects them differently. They very much put it off. We try to, inform. Well, and it's tough. I'll say this: funeral directors have not done the greatest job by being the great communicators to the public. And part of the reason I do what I do within our podcast is to be able to talk about this openly. You're right. Death is taboo. Death is scary. No one wants to talk about the end times. I get it. But we have to come to the realization as adults too, that it is going to happen. It's tough. No one wants to think about it. No one does. And I get it. The taboos, the problem is sometimes I think the taboos get taken out of context and really get thrown out there and can be misleading at times, and it's
give me an example of what you're talking about there.
I think the funeral industry it shouldn't be looked at as a gloomy industry with It's like the Addams family. It's not looked at like that. I know guys that wear really nice suits that are really nice people, that, you don't have that darkness. It's general people that want to serve. That's the thing. People say, when it comes to funeral service, that these guys are just making tons and tons of money and this and that. That's not necessarily the case in some places, and that's not necessarily what drives people within this industry either.
Sure.
You got a lot of people in rural communities. My community, I'm able to serve differently in a different capacity now, and that's important to me. But we have not done a great job communicating. I will say that, talking to the public, going to Rotary clubs, things like that, being out in public. We haven't done that great of a job. And my generation, or our generation, I guess, is trying to do that more. It's always been behind, how would I say, I hate using this term, but everything's been behind the curtain for so long.
Absolutely.
And now with social media, you see stuff like on TikTok and whatever else, you're seeing people put stuff out there. If it's not the right person talking about it, then what are we doing? I think we're not benefiting the funeral industry if us as funeral directors aren't talking about it. But yeah, there's a taboo to it.
So I want to pick up on something you said there, because you were talking about people come to this line of work as wanting to serve, and almost like a calling. So let's first address the financials of this. How do you answer when people ask you, how much do you make?
Generally, and here's the thing, we've had the opportunity to speak to several colleges, mortuary colleges, things like that, just to be out in the public with what I've done, trying to educate people. I'll tell people, and I'll tell these people within funeral service that are just coming in, the new generation. It can be upwards of $45,000, $60,000. But as I've said before, the big thing people have to understand, it's all about volume too. So if you're in a busier firm, I go back to this. I'll say it like this: you have to sell more to make more. It's like that with. And if you're not doing more funerals, you're not making more money. So if you're in a rural community doing 30 funerals a year, don't expect to make a 6-figure income out of that.
So with that in mind, is there competition between funerary directors within small communities, or is it still everybody has everybody's back? Like, is it? Because I can imagine that it would get really potentially competitive, especially for, a smaller area.
It can be competitive. There for a long time, I feel like in funeral service, funeral homes didn't talk to each other a whole lot, didn't reach out, didn't try to ask for help. And I think in funeral service, a friend of mine, Brian Waters, has said this time and time again, that funeral service as a director, you can be on an island. No one understands what it is we do except the other funeral director down the street. And I think what we have to understand, the big picture is, we are in this together. Now, kind of the old mentality is, there's some competition. There's people that take it pretty seriously. And sometimes that just depends too within the area or what state you're in as well. But here in where I'm at, I'm very close with some. Now there are some that I don't necessarily really associate.
We all have favorites and non-favorites. Absolutely.
But I got my guys. If I got something, and my gals, if I've got something that's really challenging, if I don't know something that is being brought to me in an arrangements conference, there's a lot of legalities that come into this. So if I don't know something, I will reach out and ask another funeral director that has much more experience than me as to what is the proper procedure here, or what would you do? I think we as society have gotten away from that as well. I think funeral industry has been bad about it, but it's something that's
there's plenty of shade to be thrown on not asking for help, I think, across all sectors for sure. So one of the things you just said, guys and gals, and it made me think that, there's so much about culture and religion and all kinds of everything gets tangled up in the pageantry and process of how we deal with our dead. And I'm wondering, in terms of in the funerary community, is it very much that people of certain faiths and or ethnicities or what have you seek out directors that look like them, or that believe like them to do their services? And how do you, again, in a rural area, how do you make yourself approachable to everybody in that situation?
I'm going to have to unpack that a little bit. Let me start off.
Good, that's fine.
You may have to refresh me on the end of that, but
That's fine.
from a religious standpoint, I'll say this, within funeral service, you brought up something that I want to touch on first before we hit the religion. So remind me, but 70% of my mortuary class was female. This is an industry that is changing, and it's for the better, quite honestly. This has been such a male dominated industry for so long. You're seeing more female directors, more female embalmers.
The iconic image of the mortician is always like this gloomy old man, so which you are not. Gloomy and old.
Well, it doesn't have to be that way. I think we got a lot of great females. I name off the top of my head, Monica Torres, Carrie Northey, people that are educating, the public, but also educating other funeral directors and our directors, as well, embalmers. So it's not, this industry is very much in a transition, and I think it's for the better. I think more options, different people, different looking people. I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
We know that in so many other industries that, representation matters, right? That people find that it's just easier sometimes to talk to somebody who overtly has something in common with you. So, if you're gay and you're burying your gay, your homosexual partner or same-sex partner, and it's sometimes, I would think, easier to deal with somebody from that community. Do you find people that feel that way? Do you find that people of different faiths, religions, cultures, lifestyles, whatever, seek that out? Do they ever ask you, "Hey, Ryan, you seem like a nice guy, but is there a black dude I could talk to?" Anything like that?
Yeah. I'll say this. I mean, rural America is changing. The city is different. You will find, African-American firms that, that's where, African-Americans want to go. That's fine. Jewish firms, there's certain firms that, people of Judaism want to go to as well. We serve all here where I'm at. We don't, it's not, we'll figure it out.
Sure.
But people have preference, and that's fine. They have that right. I think, I don't know, from a standpoint of homosexuality, it doesn't necessarily matter where we're at. We've got, funeral homes that are owned by homosexuals as well. It's not it's not, I guess to me, it's not something that is here in rural Indiana, at least for me. It's not something that's out of the ordinary to serve all. I think that, but you do have families that have that preference. They do have preference when it comes to, there's certain firms that are Muslim firms. I mean, there's a broad range. So you are correct in saying, I want to clarify this because I feel like I got in the weeds a little bit here, but
you're fine. You're doing great.
I think ultimately, there's no room for any of the bullshit of not serving anybody.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to say here. And I want to make sure that comes out abruptly.
That's very heartening because, I just, in my head, you hear about the bakery that wouldn't bake the same-sex couple a wedding cake. And I can't imagine trying to find somebody to help me bury my partner and being turned away because, they didn't approve of our lifestyle. Like, I just feel like you're in a position and in a moment in people's lives where you just do what you can. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're saying. So that has definitely made my heart feel a lot better about, and
I feel like I needed to clear that up a little bit because when I think, oh gosh, when it comes to within this profession, trying to segregate yourself from different religions and whatever else, you can't do it. There's no way. We're such a large population of different people. You can't do it. And it makes no sense to do it. And it's not appropriate.
And death is the great equalizer. Like, it's the one, right? We're all gonna die. So it is, and especially I think, like you said, in a rural community where you don't have 30-page yellow pages, not that they are yellow pages anymore, but when there were like 30 pages of options, you absolutely have to be able to trust that the people that you come to are going to help you. So that's that's really exciting and heartening for me to hear that that's part of it. So, um,
I will say this real quick. Within everything, you'll have a bad apple here and there, but
no,
you know,
no industry is populated entirely by saints. So absolutely, absolutely. There will be jerks everywhere, Ryan.
it is what it is. I think,
Yeah.
but yeah, funeral service for me, it also helps too. I get to learn. I get to
Mhm.
learn more about different cultures. I just, it's amazing to me how much I don't know. And I think, sitting here talking with these families about what it is they do that's, I guess specific to them and their culture at times, that it's a great learning experience as well. So yeah, I learn with them and they teach me.
So tell me then the most sort of the funeral that it comes to mind that where you learned the most, that you felt most, right, I'm making it up as I go. Tell me what we
Now
got to
you're
do.
good. Now you're good. I wasn't prepared for that question. Um,
Sorry.
honestly, I could probably, I could say, I've had boy, that's a tough question.
If you could
I
even
could say
just
what's
think,
been the most, I can say what's been the most impactful,
okay,
when it
that's great.
comes to
Let's do it that way.
the most impactful for me. Because it's tough, there's certain funeral homes that do certain things, and I haven't had necessarily a really broad experience with different cultures. Very much open to it, you know what I mean? Too, I want to say that. But yeah, I'll say most impactful. How about that? Because I would really have to think about that and go really deep. So I
So what was the
apologize
most
about that.
impactful experience that you've had?
I'll say the most impactful experience I've had in funeral service. How about that? I'll throw that in.
That's perfect. Yeah.
There's certain things I think you see. There's certain things that you're around. Um, there's certain people that you interact with in life, and there's certain things you see that affect you. So paramedicine, I saw an awful lot of that. Within funeral service, it changed. It's different. That person is not alive anymore. There's a lot of impact to that. There's a lot to take in there, I think, as well. I serving families within that tragic moment, teenager. Okay. For me, I'd say the hardest part within funeral service and the most impactful, and the one that just stays here. You can't unsee it. You can't unhear it. It's vivid. It's always there. Is that first initial viewing of a mother seeing her daughter, son, that's of a younger age, child, teenager. That initial outburst is, God, it makes me sick. It's horrible. It's just, I'll just say it's shitty. It's very shitty. But that is the most impactful. I mean, that's something that you don't forget. You don't forget the wail. You don't forget the scream. That person grabbing onto you and literally thrusting all their weight on you. You're holding them up. Tears down your suit, snot. All that stuff. It's wild, and it's wild because sometimes it's not just one person in the room doing that. That is a hard sound to hear, and that's a hard thing to see at times. And it's across all cultures. Pain is across all cultures in that, and that's just tough. It's tough sometimes to even really get deep about. But yeah, I mean, I'll never forget that. I've seen a lot of things, and I'll never ever forget that sound.
The sound of somebody's heartbreaking is not something anybody should forget.
That is so right on. I've never heard of it that put that way. That is so right on. That's very, very accurate.
I mean, you are in the really difficult business of you are the one that makes death real for families. Because I know from personal experience, when my grandfather, who was the first person close to me that died, they told me he was dead. And I was like, sure, whatever. Right? It didn't really hit home. And then I remember when I saw him for the first time, I was that whale. And that, I had to be carried out and, all of that because seeing him made it real. And every day in your work, you have to do that to people. You have to be the one that is standing there when the reality of their loss hits them with all that is. How do you keep smiling and keep putting one foot in front of the other?
I'm a big fan of cigars and I work out a lot. So I'll say that. Big fan of bourbon, a little bit of scotch here and there. I don't have a problem, people. Okay, let's not go ahead and start that out there. But another thing too is I like to talk to my other funeral directors that
Yeah.
I that are my friends within this business. We all deal with things differently and we see things differently, process things differently.
Mhm.
So decompressing sometimes is over a beer and conversation, over a cigar and conversation. I'm on the phone a lot, with a lot of people, just trying to sometimes navigate things. So yeah, that's good decompression. I love to podcast. That's another great way of getting things off your chest. But yeah, and also I think trying to be as healthy as you can. The hours of this business, are 24/7.
Sure.
I mean, I could get a phone call right now and have to leave and go serve a family. So it's tough. So you've got to get rest in when you can. You've got to try to be healthy, as healthy as you can too. But yeah,
So
I'm a big fan of cigars and scotch.
So, in paramedic community, which I know you're very familiar with, and the police community, which related, so you're probably familiar with that as well. There is a lot of talk about how seasoned people in that gallows humor is how they get through. That you just like the years of wait and the darkness that you see in those jobs twist your humor. And there's been a lot of publicity lately about, things posted by people there that are inappropriate. And they're like, look, you just have to understand. Like, is it funny if I look at it from somebody who's not ours eyes? Absolutely not. But like, that's what happens. Do you feel like that happens in the funerary community as well? Or do you think that the difference in your circumstances and how you're engaging with that makes sort of protects you from that darkness and that gallows
I
humor?
think there's certain ways of coping. I think some people cope that way.
Mhm.
I think there's funny things that occur and that happen in funeral service, just as there is
Sure.
within anything. Paramedicine. Different circumstances you walk into.
Bodies
Sometimes
do weird
uh,
shit, so I can only
they,
imagine.
they do, and I think that humor is a one way of getting out of it. Kind of
Mhm.
and really processing it differently. I don't know sometimes if that humor can translate very well to the general public. I
Sure.
think when it comes to humor within funeral service, and I can't really give you anything off the top of my head,
Sure.
but when it comes to paramedicine, doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, funeral directors, people that are in that clinical aspect of things, they do have a different sense of humor at times. And it's just sometimes to maybe process things a little bit differently. Uh,
Yeah.
I think you got to be careful what you put out there, just with
Absolutely.
anything, social
Yeah.
media. But yeah, humor does help with that, processing it and just trying to work through it at times, because there is a lot at times to work through.
I think it's interesting because again, I work with the aftercare for people. And one of the things that's super important and that they really like drone in over and over and over again when you're getting certified and when you're working with people for especially for bereavement counseling is that you have to have clinical supervision. You have to have your own counselor that you are seeing regularly to help you deal with all of the things that you're getting thrown at you from other people.
Mm.
Um, what, mental health, there's a lot of people and a lot of industries that are still struggling with the fact that mental health is health and that it's okay to see a counselor. What does that look like in your experience in the funerary industry? Have you guys, or does it tend to be pretty embraced in that sector, or are people, crazy people go to see shrinks?
I honestly, I think more so now than ever, it's talked about, just because of COVID, just because of the mass death that occurred in some of these areas. New York, you had Washington State that had a good amount. Chicago, a lot of these places really had some tricky circumstances that they really had to kind of tread through a little bit,
Yeah.
especially just the volume itself. Mental health, yeah, I mean, it's something that is talked about. It's something that's brought up within the associations. Your
Mhm.
state, or at least my state association, can provide us avenues if we need it, if we want to reach out. Your employer can do that as well. You've got some employees or employers that will supply that for their employees as just something that they provide as well. The big thing is I think people have to understand how hard it is to take that first step to go talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Because I think you brought it up, the idea of talking to somebody, you're considered a nut job or something like that. That's not the case. Mental health is different. And it's more different now than ever, especially just for the general American right now. Well, general citizen in the world. I mean, everybody was shut down for so long. So you've got loneliness and a lot of things that come into play there. But
We've all got counselors right now, thanks to COVID. Counseling is taken off. So yeah.
My thing is this: my counselors, honestly, sometimes are the funeral directors that I reach out to. I have that, I've gone and talked to people if I've had something that really, really hit home, of which, that there are those things. But, I think we got to make sure we're not afraid of it. We do have access. That's not a problem. The biggest issue is making the phone call to say, hey, can I just vent to you for 30 minutes? That's the big thing. Reaching out is the problem. I don't know that from a standpoint of access, that's the issue at all.
So what for you, we've talked a lot about some of the negatives of your job. What's your best day at work? What brings you the most joy?
You know what? One big thing I can say about paramedicine that I didn't get, but I do get in funeral service is the word thank you. Validation is something that is big for me. I don't know why. I aim to please. I like to please. I like positive reinforcement. It's very helpful. Negative reinforcement to me, I mean, being on social media, I just kind of shake my head at and I don't worry about. But positive reinforcement does hit, and it does hit differently. If you just have a random card that shows up in the mail that just said, hey, I'm thinking of you, it changes your day. It changes your, how things work. For me, on a daily basis, if a family member expresses positive emotion, a hug, thank you, actually saying that, you did well, thank you. Thank you for guiding us, things like that. I love that. That's what we fiend for. I think anybody fiends for, a thank you and validation. That I'm one of those people,
I hate it.
No?
Hate it so much. So much. My
I'm
husband is a praise junkie.
Really?
Oh my God, I on the daily have to tell him, good job and aren't you pretty every freaking day, Ryan, or he's a big weepy mess.
You and my wife are right on then. She gets so irritated about it. But
oh my God.
I don't know. I like it.
I don't like it. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't like I have to, even when in the past, when I've had managers, I've had to be like, okay, if you want to give me praise, here's the 5-step plan. Giving me praise. And I'm like super specific. Like it has to be immediately following the situation. It has to be measurable and it has to be extremely specific. So don't say, hey, Olivier, good job. No. That makes my ass twitch. I need to hear, gee, Olivier, the 5 candidates you got us for that director role were really outstanding and so much better quality than the ones that we had the last time we had the role open. That was great work. That is the only kind of compliment I can hear and not want to punch the person in the face.
Who are you?
Oh I know. Could you imagine my poor husband's existence, Ryan? Oh my gosh. Like he tries to compliment me and I'm like, so what are you trying to say? I am totally that woman that's like, I look pretty today. Trying to say I don't look pretty every day. Is that where we're at? Like that's his life.
My wife gets irritated about it, but yeah, I mean, I think within funeral service, we're accomplishing a task and that task is dictated by that family. And when they're happy, I'm happy. So that's the goal. That's the day-to-day for me. If the family's happy, I'm very, very much happy. I take a lot of pride, especially in the embalming and preservation aspect of things. So You know, I've gone to a lot of different classes to be good at that and to
Mhm.
really exude a certain skill within my area, you know. So, you know, that's something I take pride in as well. So yeah, when the family's happy, it's a good day.
So now I'm going to ask a really dumb question. And you have to
Dumb?
promise not to make, yeah, totally dumb question. So you have to promise not to make fun of me for this.
No, we good.
So the funerary business, you have work in one of the most hyper regulated industries in this country.
Hyper
There's,
regulated?
yeah, like there's so many regulations about everything you do, 15,000 forms, all of the things you have to do, et cetera, et cetera. Exactly. Exactly. Big giant book of facts. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's
I
this,
have it with me.
there is this like cheeky bitch part of my brain that I know that that's the case, but that part of my brain goes, what the hell are they going to do? They're already fucking dead. Like, you're not going to kill anybody. Why do we need all of these crazy regulations? So that is my stupid question. Why do we need all the crazy regulations for handling people that are already dead?
The big thing is, and I think we've seen it more so now than ever, is now that we understand that, you know, when you have a mass quantity of people that have passed away, you have to do something with those decedents. It becomes a public health issue if not. Funeral service, if not done, creates a public health issue. You know,
Okay.
I think getting these people where they need to go is the purpose. So were you going to add something to that?
I have seen Monty Python. I understand that, you know, it's the bring out your dead carts and you have to burn them. I know these things. But so apart from like, you know, dead people lying around, so we should dispose of them. What are the regulations there to protect?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you've got rules that are there to ultimately protect the consumer. You've got, you know, the Federal Trade Commission's rule, FTC rule, you know, that's there, you know, to be as transparent as possible, you know, and honestly, just fully transparent within funeral service. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know that any of those rules, you know, it's hyper regulated, I think, because you've had people that were bad apples at times too.
Sure.
You know, and I think that's part of the reason we do well, we have to do some of the things we do. You know, you've got
Yeah.
certain times of the day that you can cremate people in the, you know, the state of New York because of different regulations per state. So as funeral service changes per state,
Why would
there's
they
all
regulate that? Why would they care? That's exactly the kind of thing. Like so
I
that's
can
the
tell you this. I can tell you this. It really brought a problem to them when it came to COVID because they only had a certain amount of time during the day. They actually had to go back and change that to where crematories could run longer. So sometimes that regulation can really hem you up too. I think we got to think about that.
But I think that's the kind of stuff that to me, like just prima facie, I hear that and I just think, how did we get here? Like, like I just can't in my head figure out why we need it. Just feels like one of the areas that has like a bunch of unnecessary regulation that is all a lot of reaction. But that's again as a layman. So I'm trying to get educated here, even
I,
if it's a dumb question.
no, it's not a dumb question, but I will say this. I think, you know, when you're dealing with someone's loved one, I think there should be
Mm.
a sequence, a rubrics to follow. And that's what this regulation provides. And it's there to benefit the consumer, but also to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do by law.
Mhm.
You know, and I think that's big. And the reason some of this regulation has popped up is because you've had people that have just have done things that maybe were inappropriate. You also have different states that consider different, you know, when it comes to cremation, they consider that, you know, a toxic gas at times that goes into the
Mm.
atmosphere. So that could be a reason that there's regulation for that. So it just varies with different people. I mean, you see, we don't have any regulation for natural organic reduction because it's not legal here in this state, but it is
Mhm.
elsewhere.
Sure.
So something like that, it's going to be extremely regulated because it needs to be done right and be done correctly. But, you know, I think sometimes too, you've got people that just pass laws to pass laws, you know, and sometimes laws that get passed that don't have anything to do with funeral service will affect funeral service. For instance, insurance, when it comes to insurance assignments,
Mhm.
you know, when it comes to life insurance, sorry, I just went blank. Life insurance,
Uh-huh.
that's something that is extremely regulated. So if there's a change there as to, when it comes to the funeral home being able to acquire those funds, it affects the funeral home, it affects cash flow, it affects a lot of different things. So sometimes people just without, not even in our industry, certain regulations, because we deal with so many different parties within this realm of funeral service, it can affect what we do and our business at times.
That makes sense. I mean, I know so many people that have to deal with normal insurance companies to get paid on the regular with living patients and living people. I can't even imagine. And those people can go and scream at the insurance companies when you're dealing with the dead. Like, they can't go scream. What are they going to do? Threaten to not make their payment, find a new carrier? So their options are fewer.
What I'll say is this: the biggest thing I think we run into as well is sometimes who has the legal right of disposition. That can be tricky in this day and age at times, depending on what type of family it is, and depending on how many kids there are. If there's who is the next of kin, if you can't locate the next of kin, what happens there? So there does have to be regulation and certain things we have to follow by law to make sure we're doing it correctly, because especially within the funeral service, funeral industry, lawsuits happen, and part of these regulations, I think, are to protect the consumer, but us too.
So we have lots of like we talked a minute ago about like the mortician, shtick of like my kids are really into Beauty and the Beast right now. So I think about the guy that Gaston brings. It's a long face and really grim. And I'm sure that 99% of what's out there is terrible representation. Is there any pop culture reference that actually gets it right? And caveat, I have to warn you that my business partners and I talked about this, and we have a bet going on what you're going to say for what is the right one. So no pressure, but if you were going to pick a pop culture reference that was,
is it a reality, like a reality TV show or a
just like
sitcom or something?
It's a TV show. It's a TV show.
All right. There's one that I will say that I feel is accurate, and I've gotten into, and my father liked it. My business partners liked it. Is 6 Feet Under is probably the closest to something that is accurate.
Pushing Daisies.
Pushing Daisies. I haven't seen that. Seen that. I'll say that, but 6 Feet Under, HBO did that pretty well. We've got some reality series now within funeral service that are coming out. Not sure how I feel about those quite yet. It
feels really inappropriate.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure where I'm at with that yet, how that works. I haven't had the opportunity to watch one yet. I think there's 2 episodes out on, I don't know if it's Discovery or Netflix, but I'm going to be watching that and just paying attention. But 6 Feet Under is, because it also talks about family turmoil and certain things that you're dealing with there. And yeah, 6 Feet Under. So you were saying Pushing Daisies.
You let me down.
Did the other person win?
Yeah.
What'd they say?
6 Feet Under. They're like, obviously he's going to say 6 Feet Under when you ask him this.
But you know what? I'll give him that. I haven't seen Pushing Daisies, so I can't say anything about that. But for me right now, I've seen
6 Feet Under. All right. I'll give them that. I will let them know that they were right. It's fine. She's very smart. She's often right. So
I let you down.
I know. That's okay. I'll forgive you this time. So when I'm hearing you talk a lot about like the regulations and you walk people through, when people are looking to hire a funeral director, they're not in a great place usually, emotionally. So first of all, when should people really be looking at these types of things? And second of all, in those moments, what should you look for to find the right place?
I'll say this first and foremost, friends, if you feel like red flags pop up, it's okay to stop what you're doing and call somebody else. So I don't even
know what a red flag would be in the funerary world. What is that?
Everything.
They drop the body.
everything is transparent. You know, you're the one that drives this. You're the one that drives the entire process. So saying I can't do something or you can't do something, it shouldn't really be part of the vocabulary. If you want to see your loved one, you can see your loved one. If a funeral director says, you know, for instance, I'll say this with organ donation, and I'll get some heat about this. I've heard families say that there's been funeral directors that have said to them that, you know, you can't see your loved one because of what occurred during the actual donation when it comes to organ donation. That's not true. That's an outward lie. That's an absolute lie. You can see your loved one. And that's something we've talked about publicly as well, you know, and trying to educate people, because when it comes to someone passing away within the hospital, the first call the hospital has to make here in Indiana, because it's law. I'm not sure if it's national law or not, but they call a donation network, and see if that recipient is actually able to, you know, donate organs, scan corneas, whatever else, with permission from the family. The donation network would have to contact the family. But that's always been, that's that process. But what I'm saying is if you sit down with a funeral director and they tell you that because of the situation your family went through with donation that you can't see them, that's a lie. So that, for me, that's a misnomer that is a red flag, huge red flag.
Okay.
And you can stop what you're doing. And I want to make this clear. You can stop what you're doing and walk away, call somebody else, you know. And you talked about funeral homes. I think I'm going back to your first question here. You know, families, so in these situations, they don't know who to call. A lot of times families have family funeral homes, you know, or within the bigger
We've
cities.
always used so-and-so. Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, sometimes it's their own family tradition. You know, my grandpa came through here. You hear that a lot when it comes to funeral service and you know, our funeral home or wherever else. You know, you hear about that. Mom was here, you know, so we've got to go here. And that's fine. You know, sometimes people have that loyalty. There's a lot of times too that Google may be something that comes into play. You know, if it's not a big family and they're by themselves, they don't know what to do. The internet comes into play there as well. So there's sometimes people will just reach out that way, you know, and find a website and call. You've got people that price shop to see what, you know, because we have to give in Indiana. Well, actually it's nationwide. We have to give those prices out on the phone. If you ask us questions about price, and that's another thing, I'll throw that out there too. Big red flag. If your funeral director if you call and you're asking for, you know, what is your direct cremation price, or what is your 2-day service price with, you know, a 4-hour viewing or a 4-hour viewing and a day service, yada, yada. They have to give you that. That's a big red flag. If you don't get a price, then that's a big flag, especially if it's just a broad number, because I'm sure in the middle of the night when that comes up, because people call 24/7.
Yeah.
You know, I don't.
Because people die 24/7. So yeah.
Right. And my thing is well, even people that are just calling to find out price, it doesn't matter what time it is. Sometimes you've got different agencies that call to find out too, to put it on their website and online, which is fine. But, you know, there's at times I don't have that next to my bed. You know what I mean? That general price list to give every client, every family. So, and that's, you know, that's part of that FTC rule, is when you walk in the door, they've got to hand that to you, that director. That way it's transparent.
There's an easy fix there, like a little lamination. You've got a quick sheet right next to the bed, Brian. Your wife won't mind. I'm sure that's fine. Just a little price sheet right there. Done.
He gets sideways. That phone rings in the middle of the night. There's not a whole lot of stuff there on her end for you know, for what I'm getting ready to deal with. But, you know, I understand she's a nurse. She's busy as well. So
oh my God. So you're both 24/7 people.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's a wild ride. I will say that. But yeah, just getting back to the red flags though, there are some when you feel like a big red flag, when you don't feel like something has been explained well enough to you. Stop what you're doing. Ask the questions. If you feel you're not getting an honest answer, it's okay to say, hey, let's stop what we're doing. I got to call a few people and go from there. You can always have your loved one transferred from one funeral home to the other if you're unhappy with certain things. There are options out there, but I think families get tied into the idea that, you know, well, I didn't know that. I didn't, wasn't necessarily told that.
Yeah.
If you ask the question, we have to answer it. And that's part of what we do.
I think for me, talking to people, so full disclosure, I have overseen funeral for my grandmother, which involved me, a cell phone, and in the yellow pages, standing in the parking lot, shopping around for the cheapest cremation we could get. Uh, it was a complicated family moment, Ryan.
Yeah.
And then my dad donated his body to medical science. So like we just signed the forms, they took the body away, they sent back a box of dust.
Mhm.
Done. So I haven't really been through it, but I know other people who have. And the overrunning assumption that people tend to make is that every tiny thing related to what you do is extortionately expensive. And so I know people would worry, if I put on the brakes and have to transfer the body, is that going to be like $5,000 to move the body across town to some other home? Can you speak a little bit to, like, at what point do the costs get like really astronomical? At what point is it really kind of not that big of a deal in the greater scheme of things?
The biggest thing I want to say here is the family drives that conversation. People talk about the casket and the vault. I can supply you with a cheaper version of what you're looking for. I can supply you with an expensive version. I can supply you with a middle of the road, maybe where you're happy type of deal. You drive that conversation. I can tell you where I would say where costs get kind of confusing for people is with the casket and the vault, cemetery costs, because there's third-party costs that come into play here too, flowers, like that, things that we all charge for in that one lump sum bill, and then we pay those third parties. Okay, there's costs like that that come into play as well. But if you choose a mahogany, excuse me, I'm sorry, oh goodness, if you choose a mahogany casket, that's an expensive casket. That's wood that comes from overseas. That's one of those things where that's going to be pricier because of the type of material it is. You choose something that's veneer, it's going to be different. You can choose, you have options of an actual cardboard box. If that's something, it's called basically an alternative container and a viewing box in so many words. You can do that as well. It doesn't have to be outrageous, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that funerals aren't expensive. But the family does drive that. What I will say is this: within my facility, what you pay for is service. You pay for me, and my thing within funeral service, the labor that goes in to what you're dealing with and the actual hazards that come into play as well, dealing with human remains. There's a lot of liability and there's a lot of accountability on my end that come into play. But the workload is it's immense. It's immense to get someone where they need to be. So especially the paperwork, death certificates, all the third-party stuff that's all added in, it does look like it's expensive, and I'm not going to say it's not, but it doesn't have to be if the family doesn't want it to be. I mean, you drive that, but yeah, I mean,
you can make your own choices that can really, really dramatically impact like the cost of that. Sure.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You've got some cemeteries too that require a vault. So maybe the family in a certain area of the United States didn't necessarily have to buy one, but in this cemetery they require a vault. So sometimes you go back to the regulation aspect of things. Yeah. We have to follow the rules of the third parties that we're involved with as well.
Sure. And I know that like with my grandmother, we had to do some outside the box thinking. I come from an old Southern family, Ryan, that has a family cemetery, of course, but like they're running out of room. And so there's this whole thing about who gets priority in the cemetery and blah, 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 blah. And my grandmother didn't make the cut, mostly because nobody liked her. And so we had her cremated and then had a new headstone made for my grandfather that had like a container for her remains to be there and they're together. But it's the whole thing. But it's that whole outside the box thinking that I'm sure that for me was a huge deal. I'm sure for you, you're like, yep, sounds like day ending and why. For what you do.
No, and I think with anything, we get a bad rap. The media doesn't help us at all at times because they love to talk about the negativity. They love to talk about the things that occurred that were wrong.
Yeah.
And not about the good necessarily that funeral directors do. And there's a lot of good. There's a lot of healing, grief work that comes into play here. And sometimes maybe not the funeral director doing it, but guiding you in the direction where you can get those services and get that help. So, there's a lot of good that comes from funeral directors within this industry, just with helping and serving.
So if you could roll back the clock to when you decided to join this, what do you wish you knew then that you know now? Not necessarily that would have dissuaded you, but just that would have informed better the choices that lie ahead.
Here's the thing. I think when you get into this, you got to understand, especially in a family business, you do it all. It's not, you're not hiring a lot of people out to do things that, because it creates overhead for you and for the business.
Sure.
My thing is it's not like I'm not up at night anymore. You've got certain areas in the United States where funeral homes may or may not do embalmings overnight, they wait until the morning to come in and deal with that, what happened overnight. They've got removal companies that will make those removals for them and take that person into their care. It's a little different here. In most cases, we don't have a huge staff. So I'm still up at night. I'm still moving around. That's a big thing that I wouldn't say it was something I didn't know getting into, but especially COVID and what came into play there, there was a lot more of that and a lot more of that all at once. So the month of November and December were, it was a wild 2 months. So a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of time being away from the kids and whatever else. But sleep is something, just understand especially in a smaller firm, you're going to work weekends, you're going to work nights, it's not anything that is a 9-to-5 job by any means. Now, like I said, you've got bigger services that are a lot busier than us, that have different ways of going about it when it comes to working overnight. But, with us, it's just not that way. We just don't.
You'll sleep when you're dead.
Well played. I'll give you that. Well played. But yeah, so sleep is something. Understand you may go without a little bit.
All right. So one last question, and then I'm gonna let you go. But I can't talk to a funeral director and not ask. Do you believe in ghosts? Have you seen one?
Man, I lived in the funeral home growing up. So, for me, I've never experienced anything that's really been supernatural. And that's the thing as people, as a kid, I'll tell you this. It's interesting you bring that up because I'll say this, when it comes to like my kids, they'll come into the funeral home and we want to talk about supernatural or whatever else. I've got one kid that has no problem being around decedents that have passed away and watch my father or myself put on cosmetics or be there in the room. You know what I mean? But I've got two other kids that when they come in our back door at the funeral home, and we've had kids at our funeral home a lot here lately because schools have been shut down and yada, yada, or whatever. They'll come in the back ramp of our funeral home, and I've got two kids that won't even look to the right when they come through my chapel and run into our foyer and go upstairs. I've got one that doesn't have a problem with that. It's interesting how everybody processes that, how we process that. They think it's ghostly, and that's what bothers them. My middle child doesn't have that fear, doesn't have that issue. I've never experienced anything, at all that would be supernatural or anything like that. I believe in ghosts. I think there's certain things you can't explain. I mean, you just can't. And I truly believe that comes into play. But I don't have a problem being in the funeral home. All the lights are off. And, I've got, a few different decedents, within my facility. That doesn't bother me. It doesn't scare me. I don't hear noises, and I think people have to understand too, that's not where that person died.
That's true. That's true.
And
I can freak myself out in my own home with no dead people when the lights are off and my husband is out of town. So, I also think part of it is hyperactive imaginations can definitely override common sense and create much ado out of abso-freaking-lutely nothing. So
Have you ever been someplace and you just walked in and you feel that eeriness, that
Yep.
oh my gosh, that
Yep.
feeling where the air sucked out of the room, the tension, you feel that? I don't feel that at the funeral home, but I felt that other places, and I'm around death daily. I felt that other places, different areas that in the US you go to and you see haunted whatever. Even certain homes. Even certain homes you go into and you take somebody out that's passed away, crime scenes, things like that. There's an eeriness, there's a weird feeling sometimes that sucks the air out. So yeah, I believe that there's something out there. There's something going on. But from a standpoint of a floating apparition, just running through the funeral home and scaring everybody, I've never experienced anything like that at all.
I'm going to choose to interpret your answer differently. I'm going to choose to interpret your answer that yes, you have felt the presence of a ghost, just not at your funeral home. Because that's the answer I want you to have, right?
I'll say this since I let you down earlier. I'll say this. I'll go with that. I've felt the presence of something, but it's always been in a situation where it's never been at the funeral home. If you there's certain situations you walk into and you're like, oh, this doesn't feel right. And I think that's common for, maybe not common, but I think people understand that and they have that feeling. I've felt that before. I think there's something to be said for that. So yeah, I agree with you.
I'll take it. We are out of time, but before we go, is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you want to, or anything that you want to make sure and share with our listeners?
Well, can I do kind of plug city real quick? Is that right?
Plug.
Hey, so if you guys want to hear more about funeral service, kind of what we do, and we go deeper into it, myself, Brian Waters, funeral directors in Indiana, talk about funeral service on our podcast called Undertaking the Podcast. If you guys would like to be a guest, you can find us at undertakingthepodcast.com. info@undertakingthepodcast.com is our email. You can reach out to us and hey, we'll put you on as a guest and we'll talk about things. We answer all kinds of questions, take phone calls, all that good stuff. So it's been a great ride, and I'll be honest, I think it's helpful. We get a lot of our listeners, the general public, and we're just trying to be as transparent as possible with people.
That is awesome. And I will have all of the links to all of that in the show notes, as well as your email address and all of that, so people can definitely find you to follow up with all of the questions. I will probably be following up more about the spooky because that's where my jam is. I'm not going to lie. So,
right.
All right. Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you for joining us.
Rock and roll, friends. Take care.
You've been listening to Hey, I Want Your Job. For more information on how you can get your own awesome job, visit ONH Consulting at www.onhconsulting.com. We offer incredible resumes, no-nonsense career advice, and real-world tips for landing a job in today's market. Check us out on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Insta for more insider information. Soon, you'll be hearing us say, I'm Michelle Olivier, and hey, I want your job.